Hello. Today I'm going to be talking with you guys about my fitness journey and my relationship with food. Something to know about me: I've struggled with binging and restricting patterns in the past. It's something that still can be prevalent depending on how my headspace is, but I just wanted to dive into kind of what binging has been like for me with the fluctuations of weight and eating habits, as well as some of the tips and mindset switches that helped me along my journey in gaining control over my relationship with food and being able to stay on track and see progress towards my goals. So after taking care of my mom, my binging habits definitely started to come up. I already had come from a big household. I'm the fourth of 5 kids, and when something like a treat was in the house, you had it right then and there, or you didn't get it at all. So that was kind of the background before even hopping into fitness of what my mindset around food was like. It's like if I had something in front of me, I had to eat it all right then and there, otherwise I'm not gonna get it. So after taking care of my mom, food for me became a way to cope. I had really thrown myself into everything I was doing because I was trying to numb some of these unconscious thought patterns and anxieties that were giving me trouble. So after taking care of my mom, I felt really lost. I was going back to school. I was in classes full time. I was working full time. I had a pretty emotionally intense job. I was actually an RA in college and ended up running a building, and it was a lot. I ended up working full time my last semester of school, and it would be like 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. every single day of just back to back classes. Hardly any time to breathe, hardly any time to eat food or take care of myself or check in with my headspace. There was no room for thinking. So I would go through my classes and then immediately get in the car, go to work. And I was a personal trainer working hour to hour, so didn't have a whole lot of time to be going to the bathroom, didn't have a lot of time to be eating. And so by the end of the day, I've been in school from 8 a.m. and working till like 7:30 p.m. And then I get home, I have all these things I have to do. And I am just so exhausted, so tired. I would fall into these binging cycles. And so there's a few reasons why binging patterns can show up, at least that I've seen in my life, and what kind of causes them to get stuck in those cycles. So after a long day, when you're absolutely exhausted, you're beat, you have no energy, and then you go to eat, and it's probably going to be the biggest meal you're having that day. If you haven't been eating throughout the day, more likely than not, your body's going to be triggering for you to catch up with food, and so you end up overeating and overindulging than you might have if you had spread out your food during the day. At least for me, that was something that was impacting, these binging and restricting patterns. So the second component of why these binging patterns really started for me was I was avoiding some of my emotions and my thoughts. And it's pretty easy to fall into that cycle of using food to cope in a negative way, because again, coping with food isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not the worst of all evils for sure. But for some of us, it can be pretty debilitating when it makes you feel out of control and like it's taking up a lot of your headspace and your life in general. So for me, I'd have that moment of silence and I was just so uncomfortable with it because I'd have all these unconscious thought patterns just cycling over and over and over. And to avoid sitting with that discomfort, I would fall into a binging cycle. Because when those cycling of thoughts go on and on and on and on, and you haven't developed the best coping strategies to learn how to handle that and to learn how to be comfortable with that silence, it's really important to give yourself that time to just sit through and process those emotions and those thought patterns as they arise, so that you can let go, some of these things that you're telling yourself that you might not even be consciously aware of. And paying attention to how you're talking to yourself and your headspace can really help with overall emotional regulation and feeling in control when it comes to your relationship with food. I have found that people that tend to be neurodivergent or have some kind of trauma that impacts that emotional regulation, it's easy for us to fall into these patterns. And going off of that dopamine response, like, if you are overworking yourself and you're neglecting to really provide that self-care, that easy dopamine of just like letting go, feeling like you have the ability to let go and just be and experience that dopamine rush, it can make it really easy for those binging patterns to develop. And for me, again, that was part of the reason why I fell into these binging habits. So 3 years ago, I committed to my journey of self-growth and really looking at mending my relationship with food. I actually started writing workout plans when I was taking care of my mom and happened to change somebody's life doing it, and it kind of gave me faith to pursue this path that I'm on now. It's really hard for me to believe that this platform has grown as much as it has, and to think that I'm where I'm at now from a personal development standpoint. It gives me a lot of peace to be able to look back at, my 20-year-old self who was just so lost, and to just be proud of the growth and the progress that I've made and the self-love that I've developed. It's not easy to stop and slow down and look at your emotions and the things that are bothering you and those traumas and different experiences that you haven't released yet. After I graduated college from UVA and I got my degree in kinesiology, which is the study in like biomechanics of human movement, I'm a major nerd when it comes to this stuff. Like, I love to look at the emotional side of things and the headspace around fitness and food, because when you can really break down some of these barriers and help people develop coping strategies that are strong for them, they take better care of themselves, they're able to stay on track with their goals and just achieve their dreams. And that paired with programming that supports, fixing imbalances, preventing injury down the line, gives you functional strength as well as, progressing you toward your goals, whether that's your squat, your bench, your deadlift, your overall strength, moving without pain or building muscle, losing fat, whatever it is. It is so important to break down that emotional and mental side of things and that programming side of things and just put it together and give people the tools and the skills and the belief in themselves and that confidence to move forward. That's how you keep somebody on track, and that's how you get them to their goals. Fast forward in my pursuit of growing my coaching business, because this is my passion, I got into bodybuilding. I was working with a coach for, about a year, and it was a very big learning experience. Definitely brought up a lot of those issues around food that I was having and discipline. It was really challenging. It really, really pushed my discipline. I ate like the same thing for 7 months straight. So as I was starting to look into prep after that off season, I had to stop like 13 weeks out because it was just too much. I didn't even really care about stepping on stage, and I felt so out of control with food. Like, I didn't have the capability to stay disciplined. And for me, my relationship with food started to go into a more negative direction. I would overeat on a spoonful of almond butter, and almond butter is still something I really struggle with, or any kind of nut butter. But I would overeat on a spoonful of it, and I would then binge on half the container or more, struggling to feel out of control with that, and then to watch my body bloat, and then to guilt, and then fall into that same cycle of guilting and repeating the pattern because it's the negative thought cycles that I was numbing and avoiding by falling into these binging cycles. And so I decided to take a step back. It was really, really difficult for me. But I knew that I needed to fix my headspace. Social media was popping off for me for the first time. And, all of these loads of comments coming in about my body gave me such terrible body dysmorphia, in addition to me already beating myself up from going off track. And it was just a recipe for not great things. So I took like a year of an off season. I thought bodybuilding was not for me. I was like, this is not a healthy lifestyle. This is not something I could ever do. Like, it is just not made for me. It's not in my cards. And in the fall, I found my coach who I have now, and he's been lighting my light and really helping break down the emotional side of things with me, right? Because I'm a coach. I have the skill, I have the knowledge. I don't in the prep sense, which, That's one of the reasons I have my coach. But it's really important to have people in your corner who hold you accountable and like really ask you, you know, what's going on? Like, why are you struggling? Why do you feel out of control? The why. When you can figure out the why, you can move forward and you can release whatever you're supposed to release and, you know, get back on track and keep moving forward toward those goals. So my coach is lighting my light right now, and that's a big reason why I'm able to be as disciplined as I am right now. Like, I really want this, and I'm really focusing on keeping a healthy headspace with it. I haven't been perfect, but you know, the amount of control I have over my relationship with food versus a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, dude, like, it makes the struggle so much more worth it and so much more fulfilling. You do have to do the dirty work to be able to release some of these, you know, negative coping strategies, or, you know, if you want to transform your relationship with food and fitness in any regard. So some of the things that have helped me, just from a general standpoint of things, not as much on the emotional side, it's important to recognize that if you like a food, you're gonna want more of it, and that's okay. You're allowed to like food, you're allowed to enjoy what you're eating, but you can be strategic about it. So there's 2 strategies I have adopted that have helped me with food, with ones that I like. One being planning that out as the food that I get to indulge in for the day. Like, maybe it's a very high-fat, you know, food like chocolate covered almonds, and I know me, I'm not going to have just 1 serving. I'm not just going to have 2 servings that day. I'm probably going to have the whole bag. So I like to buy chocolate covered almonds that have 4 to 5 servings, and I can plan that out so that I can have that over the course of the day, and I have on top of that a food with a start and a stopping point. That's another big one. If you pick things that are like big bags and they have tons of servings and it's hard to separate that, you know, starting point and stopping point, it's gonna be trickier. You like that food, you're probably not gonna want to measure it, and it's, you know, an invitation potentially, at least for me, for a binge. So I like having foods where I'm kind of planning out that general serving size to support my macros within the day. You know, the number of treats that you're buying at a given time can also be something to look at, right? Whatever you have around you is going to influence what you're eating, what your brain's saying to pick up and start indulging in. If I have multiple treats that I know I have in the house, and, you know, maybe I did want 1 serving of chocolate covered almonds and I also wanted a serving of some kind of sweet treat, I'm probably going to have a little bit of everything, and that little bit of everything is going to end up being much more than I had planned and anticipated for initially. You can also look at your food types. I have found that highly processed foods, or foods in high amounts of added sugar, contribute to my likelihood of binging significantly, right? So something like chocolate covered almonds that has maybe 8 grams of added sugar per serving, I'm very, 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 very sensitive to that. So again, that's why I go back to that first strategy of kind of planning that out so I know I have a starting and a stopping point. With most processed foods, your body's not going to get the same cues for fullness and, you know, knowing when to stop eating a food. So it's also important to make sure you're incorporating whole food sources that have nutrients that you need, that are going to help you and your body learn those cues of fullness. And when you kind of strategize these things, you can learn which foods you might have more trouble with versus others. Like for me, you're gonna see my video the week before this about how I overate on almond butter again. Like I really tried. And I'm so freaking proud of myself because I only went over on it by a couple servings. Versus in the past, I would have binged the entire container or half of the container. So you get to learn and observe how you and your headspace responds to various food types. Or you can get a coach to help you. That's one of the things that I love being able to support people through, because it can be an emotionally intense experience. If you need more help, I always suggest getting more help, whether that's talking to somebody, a specialist, a counselor, a therapist. Just make sure that you're meeting your needs and you're taking care of yourself. So unprocessed whole food sources that are nutrient dense and high volume are going to make you feel more full. So another strategy I like to do is make sure that I'm eating those foods before indulging on my special treats or things that I know might contribute to me falling off track. Having higher fiber also makes me feel more full and in control. Carb types also can impact it. I would have trouble with oats, like instant oats when I was in that deficit. They would trigger me so bad. And there's a difference between instant oats and steel cut oats. And when I switched to steel cut oats, it changed everything for me. So instant oats actually have a higher glycemic index versus steel cut oats. And so glycemic index refers to, you eating that food and how your blood glucose levels respond. So when you have a high glycemic food source, what happens is you have a huge spike. So it's beneficial to have foods like that right before a workout so you can get that nutrients, those carbohydrates right into your blood and, to the muscles you're trying to work so you can fuel that workout. But anyway, you'll have that spike in glucose, but then you have a more steep decline down, and so you'll experience that crash. And so to avoid that from a dopamine standpoint of my brain crashing, in addition to just my overall energy, I would fall into needing to eat more like an hour and a half later. When I switched to steel cut oats, right, that glycemic index is lower, and so you have a lesser peak and a less sharp decline down of those blood glucose levels. So for me, I know that I'm pretty sensitive to those differences. Same with added sugar, greater glycemic index and increased cravings, especially when you experience that decline down. Those are just factors that I've looked at in my journey, and just being conscious of them. I don't cut out foods. I don't say like, I can never eat this again. I'm just conscious of it, and I make sure that I'm in the right headspace to be able to fully enjoy and be present to enjoy that food. Getting more veggies in is gonna increase that volume of what you're eating, make you feel more full, and provide nutrients and fiber that are also gonna make you feel more full. These are just some of the tips that have helped me along my journey with my relationship with food and kind of overcoming some of these binging patterns, and developing better coping strategies to just feel happier overall. Hopefully some of these help you. If you guys want, I can break down some more tips and even some food types that have helped me. I know I talked about like oats being one of my things I looked at. If you guys are interested, I'd love to break down more of this sort of stuff. I'm very passionate about it. This is what made me want to start my coaching business in the first place. And if you're interested in coaching, I have one-on-one virtual coaching spots open. We look at your food and your training, and we have weekly check-ins to, help you stay accountable towards your goals. If you're interested in that, you can check out my website and my application in the link in my bio. I really appreciate you guys watching and being so supportive on my journey. I'll see you next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.